Hello. Welcome, welcome everyone. I am Roman Chebinyak of the World Resources Institute, and this is the Natural Climate Solutions Alliance session, Why Buy? The Business Case for Purchasing Nature-Based Carbon Credits. And I've also been informed that this is the last formal event of the day. So congratulations, it's been a great couple days here. For these purposes, we define NCS as nature-based solutions that also address climate change. And the objective of this session is to hopefully provide you not just with justification to purchase NCS credits, but for inspiration to do so. Now, this event has been part of a learning journey for businesses supported by the NCS Alliance, which is a coalition of NGOs, solutions providers, and businesses looking to increase demand for high quality NCS carbon credits. Now, before we dive into this discussion, let me just address one sort of elephant in the room, which is the various scandals and news reports related to carbon credits and forest carbon credits in general. Yeah. I was thinking about this recently when I read an article about vehicles, that you can actually still buy on the market today 0-star vehicles. So they rate all cars based on a 0 to 5-star safety rating, and you can still buy a 0-star safety rated vehicle, right? After however many years. So standards change, they evolve, they improve. I think of the cars I drove in as a youngster, they were either heavy steel, unable to stop within 10 meters, or super light with doors that felt like, slightly firmer aluminum foil. So we know, those of us who have been working in this space, myself since 2007, that there have been problems with some projects and that there have been problems with some methodologies. But those methodologies are being rewritten, and they're already on the market, many new methodologies that allow you to purchase high quality carbon credits today. The World Resources Institute not only supports the purchase of high quality NCS credits, I would find it difficult in this situation where there is no chance of meeting 1.5 or 2 degrees targets absent a halt to deforestation, for anyone to claim to be a corporate leader in this area without contributing to nature-based solutions. Achievement of the global goal and global net zero is the overall objective. So certainly we want companies to do everything they can to adopt science-based targets, to decarbonize rapidly, get their scope 1, 2, 3 down as quickly as possible. But nature-based solutions are an integral part of any sort of leading corporate climate strategy. Let me also just say that last December, the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity adopted the 30 by 30 nature goal. So many of the measurements that you've seen, the tracking of corporate actions towards climate mitigation, are now also going to be directed towards the nature regime. Now, one final question, or maybe a series of questions, just to set us off. Everyone here, I'm sure everyone listening is very committed to addressing climate change, right? These are the leading businesses, the leading NGOs working on this issue. But what is the value of various climate mitigation approaches? We know from the IPCC, we essentially need emissions to peak within the next 2 to 3 years to give us a decent chance of staying below 1.5 degrees. But what is your return as a business? What is the return to society, the return to the environment based on different climate mitigation approaches? High quality natural climate solutions and nature-based solution credits offer the ability to not just help avert climate change, but to deliver tangible results to local peoples and tangible results on biodiversity, regardless of what happens, right? Regardless of whether or not we peak in the next 2 to 3 years or thereafter. So with that, the question is asked, why buy NCS credits? I would flip that somewhat, which is why buy anything else? With that, Allow me to introduce our first panelist. We got a great panel here for you. Thank you for sticking through the 3 days. This is Sabine Hofnagel, Global Leader of Sustainability at ERM. She and her team have done a tremendous job of working in connection with the NCS Alliance on a report which you can find online, which places similar value in terms of biodiversity and social benefits as on carbon. So please, Sabine.
Thank you so much, Roman. And great to be with you all this afternoon. Let me see if I can make these slides work. Oh. Yes. This is a topic that's very close to my heart. Apart from my role at ERM as Global Leader for Sustainability and Risk, I also sit on the board of a really fantastic NGO called Rewilding Europe. We're heavily involved in nature-based solutions, and I've seen it in action. I could talk about that for hours, but I will instead today share some of our observations of working with the Natural Climate Solutions Alliance on the development of a CEO guide, which we worked on last year. It's just a picture of the cover here, just to remind everyone. I think it's a very useful publication, so I would encourage you to look it up. And I will also share some of our own observations on working on nature-based solutions at ERM. But first, to the question that Roman asked me, why should companies invest in natural climate solutions? Well, there are 4 reasons. Firstly, it's around mitigating business risk. Secondly, it's about meeting stakeholder demands. Thirdly, there is a big commercial opportunity. And last, it's about moving the market. And let me unpack each of those a little bit further. So we all know that climate change increases business risk, but as we've just heard, climate cannot be solved without nature and vice versa. When biodiversity disappears, we're basically losing one of the most powerful ways to mitigate against climate change. 70% of land-based resources and 66% of marine resources are heavily altered by human action. 50% of global GDP is already moderately or heavily impacted by nature loss. And if you listen to Eva Zabi from Business for Nature, it's probably closer to 100%. But there's a very significant impact, and the predictions are that nature loss might cause up to 2.3% drop in GDP by 2030. Now, of course, from extreme weather events that might be impacting supply chains or your operations, or unpredictable rainfall impacting your crops, I would say that if you are a company that has greenhouse gas emissions from land-based sources in your own value chain, you should absolutely invest in natural climate solutions. But also, if you're a company who doesn't have that, but has done everything they can to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions across their scope 1, 2, and 3, and might have some residual emissions, this is a very effective way to address them. And then, of course, the added benefit of that is that it also really helps you reduce your vulnerability and help you adapt to climate change. Secondly, stakeholder demands. Well, whether that is your own employees, customers, clients, shareholders, or the regulator, there is a real call for much more transparency around the commitments that you might be making as a company, and the call for how you're actually going to reach it. Very importantly, the commercial advantage. I believe that natural climate solutions will play a very important role in the race to net zero. It cannot be done without those. So getting involved early will help you, firstly, build your capability. It's quite complex. Lots of different departments in your organization will need to get involved. Secondly, if you invest in high quality, high integrity credits, it will allow you to differentiate and will really help with your reputation. There's obviously a first mover advantage. The ROI of investing now, both in terms of volume and price, will be significant. And then last, it's actually a very cost-effective way to mitigate against climate change, much more so than some of the technological measures. And then last, this this thing about sending the demand signals to really create a market that can properly scale at pace. We all know that investment in nature is far from where it needs to be, and particularly in those places in the world that are actually mostly impacted by climate change. Up to $8.1 trillion are going to be needed by 2050 to address climate change in connection with nature loss and land degradation. That comes to about 500 billion a year. And currently, there's only about 130 billion a year that is being spent on nature-based solutions. And 85 or 86% of that comes from the public sector. So there's a huge opportunity here for the private sector to step in. Secondly, I would say that there is quite poor public sector governance in many of the countries where nature is very rich. Putting a price on nature can actually help protect it and increase that governance. And then last, collaboration. You know, getting involved now means that you can step into this area and collaborate with project developers, standard setters, your peers, to really learn as you go along. So maybe a little bit about our own journey and where we are with natural climate solutions. So for ERM, we have been measuring our greenhouse gas emissions for about 15 years. We have set targets for 10 years, and we have publicly reported on those for the past 10 years. We are one of the very few professional services companies that has a net zero, standard aligned net zero target under the SBTi, and we are well on track to meet that target. But also we still have residual emissions, and as a professional services company that is mostly in terms of travel, us coming to places like where we are now, but also in our supply chain. And we firmly believe that climate cannot be solved without nature and vice versa. So we are stepping into this market. We're doing it in a very phased approach. This year, for the first time, along with our approach to decarbonization, we have also published our approach to nature as part of our sustainability report. These are the supplements that are available on our website. And as part of that, we launched a biodiversity policy this year. We have looked at our dependencies and our impacts. And already since 2021, we have set biodiversity targets. And one of those is to invest in natural climate solutions and do that in a kind of high integrity way. So for us, it's been a really good opportunity to also really get to understand what this means. We are involving lots of different people in our organization, from the finance department to our subject matter experts on social impact and human rights, as well as our biodiversity impact specialists, and we're learning lots. So with that, I think I will just summarize. I think it makes an enormous amount of business sense to invest in natural climate solutions, and the time to get involved in that is now. We can all learn together. We will, improve this market and create the impact that is needed. So with that, I'll hand back to Julia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sabine, for this summary and for providing also your journey. As we said, it is a journey for all the businesses that are planning to purchase credits. We talked about how to buy yesterday, actually. So the supply, the procurement process and the steps and the activity that a company can put in place, and all the different actors that are available to help companies to make a very high integrity and high quality choice. Today, as we said, we are actually talking about why buy, so the business case. So thank you for talking about that. One element of the business case is the possibility of making a claim, right? And so we are very pleased to know, as you know, the Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative has issued a claim code of practice a couple months ago. And now we have Anna Carolina Szklo with us today to talk about what is the opportunity for a company to use the claim today, and then also to tell us a little bit about what is coming. And then after that, we're going to have more testimonials from stakeholders and businesses about why they're purchasing credits. But let's now focus on the opportunity of using claims. Over to you, Anna Carolina. Perfect.
Well, thank you, Julia. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the kind invite. Yes. Your phone back. So I'm Ana Carolina Schklom, Technical Director of Markets and Standards within VCMI, the Voluntary Carbon Markets Integrity Initiative. VCMI, for those who don't know, has been set up a couple of years ago as a result of a decision by the COP in 2021, alongside ICVCM under the same process, giving the impression that we needed more guidance for voluntary carbon markets. It is not obviously a regulated market, but it needs some guidance and some clarity and a lot of transparency to make it work better. I thought it had gone already. Okay. So as Julia was mentioning, we launched the Claims Code of Practice in June 28th this year. It is actually already a result of 2 years of work. So it builds on the provisional Claims Code of Practice that we have released in 2022. It has gone through public consultation. It has been road tested by approximately 70 companies. And all the results, all the feedback we received was compiled and thoroughly revised so that we could launch the claims code as it is, as the first step of the assessment this year. By November 28, we're launching additional modules that are still being developed. So we are developing a monitoring, reporting, and assurance framework so that companies can very clearly know what, how, when, and to whom they should be providing all the metrics that are currently reported under Annex F of the Claims Code of Practice. We have, of course, worked not on ourselves, but in partnership with the main standard bodies in voluntary carbon markets. So alongside ICVCM, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, SBTI, CDP, Women Business, WRI, who's here also with us, so that we can have as much as alignment and coordination as possible. From the governance perspective, VCMI has a steering committee where we have the most strategic discussions and decisions being made. We have an expert advisory group composed of 20 experts. We have one of them here with us, observing always gender balance and geographical balance. And they gather different expertise around voluntary carbon markets, so on target setting, GHG corporate accounting, legal analysis, comms perspective, and all of that so that we can have as much support as we need. Okay, so as it currently stands on the Claims Code of Practice, we have set 4 steps so that companies can clearly know the step-by-step to make a claim. So step 1, they need to comply with what we call now foundational criteria. On the provisional claims code, for those who have been following it closely, that was what we referred before as prerequisites, but we understood from the feedback we received that that was not a language easily translatable to different languages. So which is why we came up with a different expression right now. But I'll come back to that shortly. Then step 2 is to select a VCMI claim to make. We have launched what we call the most aspirational claims. So it is silver, gold, and platinum claims for companies that already go above and beyond, that companies that are either on track to meet their near-term emission reduction targets or that have already met their targets and are willing to go beyond what they have already done. Step 3 is to meet the carbon credit use and quality thresholds required. So to that extent, I'm just coming back from a panel that we were co-hosting with ICVCM. We have deferred, as you will see in the next slides, to the CCP, the carbon credit principles from the ICVCM. And we have even copy and pasted directly all the principles into the claims code so that we make it accessible for our companies and easy for them to reach out directly to the principles. Step number 4 is the one that we are currently building on the monitoring, reporting, and assurance framework with consultancies that are helping us through the process, and also building directly the IT infrastructure for companies to report on the data. Yeah, okay. So the foundational criteria is step number 1. So companies need to first maintain and disclose an annual greenhouse gas emissions inventory following greenhouse gas protocol methodologies. Then they have to set and publicly disclose validated science-based near-term emission reduction targets and publicly commit to reaching net zero emissions no later than 2050. This is one specific point that we're looking at more closely now. There was an attempt to open the market, so that's why we say it needs to be validated, but not necessarily by SBTi. That's a recommendation, not a requirement. However, we do acknowledge that currently SBTi is the only one in town to do that. So automatically that could be interpreted as the requirement, and that does pose barriers for companies. So this is something that we are looking into right now. So just sharing current discussions we're having. The third foundational criteria is to demonstrate that the company is on track towards meeting near-term emission reduction target and minimizing cumulative emissions over the target period. So how we have assessed that? There is no current common definition on what does it mean to be on track. We made an attempt to go beyond just looking at the near-term emission reduction target against the emissions reporting on companies' inventories, because we understand that there's a lot of efforts that are being done by companies that don't necessarily translate immediately into emission reductions. So of course, for the company to actually reach that level, it needs to implement the measures. So there's cost involved and there's decision-making involved. So there's a layer of financial indicators that we suggest that companies can use so that we can follow through and understand whether those emission reductions did arise from the investment that has been made. And we also have a third layer, which is to assess the governance and the strategy of the companies, not necessarily asking companies to report on climate transition plans, as we know that this is something that is not yet worldwide used. According to CDP data, less than 1% of companies are reporting adequately on climate transition plans. However, we did look into what we have considered the most appropriate indicators within climate transition plans so that we can pull them off as best practice for companies to look at. So again, we understand that all of this is a process that takes time, takes effort, and we want companies to be able to assess the whole spectrum of the MAC curve, not just those options that will deliver immediate emission reductions, which could be led to a short-termism strategy and possibly those measures that will lead to less impact. The fourth foundational criteria is to demonstrate that the company's public policy advocacy supports the goals of the Paris Agreement and does not represent a barrier to ambitious climate mitigation. So it's not just do no harm, but it is also for them to state that they are supporting the goals of the Paris Agreement. So these are the claims that have already been put forward, as I mentioned before, silver, gold, and platinum claim. So as I said, that they are aspirational, the most visionary claims for companies to make. Not all companies are going to be able to make these claims, as we're very much aware. They address what we call the remaining emissions. So that is, if we're talking about a journey that will lead to net zero, it's not zero. So emissions continue to occur, even if the company is on track to meeting their near-term emission reduction targets and net zero in the future. So those emissions that still occur are those that we call remaining emissions. And these claims, they are claims that companies, after purchasing and retiring high-quality carbon credits according to the principles of ICVCM, in a certain percentage in comparison to those remaining emissions, they will be able to assess and make one of these claims. An additional module that we are developing right now and doing a lot of investigations and research is aimed at developing additional lower tier claims so that companies have a path towards reaching the silver, gold, and platinum, the most aspirational. So the journey does obviously not begin here. It begins way before, and it begins even before what we are now calling the low additional claims tiers. So it begins with what we call the on-ramp. So companies that are already begin on the decarbonization journey, but they're still not even meeting the foundational criteria, but they're making serious efforts, and that needs to be recognized somehow. So maybe it will take them a while. Maybe they are in specific sectors, segments, or geographies. They face more challenges. So all the research that we're doing right now is to understand more the challenges that companies face so that we can increase accessibility. So this is a graph just to try to visually represent how these claims sit within in comparison to the thresholds of the remaining emissions, as I've mentioned before. The principles from ICVCM, jumping a little bit more just because of time here, but I'm pretty sure that you're already aware of the CCPs. And on the fourth, we're building this monitoring, reporting, and assurance framework so that we can provide clear and more detailed requirements, which are already fully assurable within the claims code, but giving us step-by-step for companies to join. We are launching now September 28th, what we call an early adopters group. So a small group of companies will be able to assess this directly as we build it and influence directly so that they can actually share their experience and for us to understand and avoid any additional administrative burden on companies. So we don't need to duplicate anything that is already sitting on the market, which is why we closely coordinate with our peers. Okay, so more to come. So wrapping up, I've already mentioned that we are looking into November 28th so that we can launch the additional modules right before COP. We have been developing, and it's taking place right now, the stakeholder forum meetings. So it gathers not only companies, but also government representatives, civil society, think tanks that have been looking throughout the last months to the applicability of the claims code to assess whether it is clear, it's understandable, the language. So they have been providing very useful feedback for us. And we do hope that this is a guidance understood as a clear tool to provide more transparency, more trust, and more integrity to the market. So I thank you for your attention, and I remain at your disposal for any questions you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ana Carolina. And so as she said, Ana Carolina is staying. So if you have any question on the claim, clearly a very important piece of the system. We are working in a system where there are different actors and different elements, but the potential of making a claim is a very important one. So thank you again very much, Carolina. And now we have opportunity. So actually listen first from people that actually work on projects, on how these projects actually make a difference and therefore why it's important to invest. And then after that, we're going to hear from some companies and really their reasoning and their drivers. So I'm very happy to introduce, well, first of all, let me see if I can now do something with the slides. I will have to ask Sabine to come here. And it's really not happy, this clicker. Okay, here, perfect. So now we're going to keep this up so you see all the different people that are coming here and sharing with you their stories. First of all, now I'm very happy to have here Sandeep Roy from VNB Advisory, who is going to tell you his stories because he works for a community-based project developer with a lot of different projects, and he can tell you why it's so important. So Sandeep, over to you.
Thank you. Hi. I'm the only one who gets a clap even before I start, so it's a very promising start. No, they were clapping for me. But anyway, We can argue about that later. Um, um, okay, so I'm gonna quickly take about 7, 8 minutes. Not much of your time. It's like, why buy these credits? And I would argue why not. And the very fact that if we are seriously thinking about climate action, um, carbon credits are a massive solution to that, because this is not your problem or my problem, it's a global problem, and there are people involved who are severely affected by this problem. So it's not just the climate science that we should be worried about, we should also be worried about the social science of climate change. And that's what carbon credits actually bring onto the table, and it allows you to have climate action beyond your boundaries. And that's a very important piece of the climate puzzle. And not just because I want to pull out your heartstrings and say there are people who are dying and you need to help them, but also from a mitigation cost perspective. So your decarbonization, as much as we would like you to decarbonize and like decarbonize quickly, when I say we, I'm basically talking about the global south versus global north. And that's is the argument that I'm trying to make. As much as you would like, and we would like you to decarbonize, you would decarbonize at a very high cost. And that cost, that same amount of money can have 7 or 8 times the effect in the global south, and not just on the climate science of it, but the social science of it. And that's the argument that we make. We've been working in project development for over 20 years. We work with over 200 companies on their carbon offsets and investing into carbon projects, especially on the nature space. And the argument we make is, number one, value for your buck, and value for your buck with a story. And these are two different things these are very important elements of climate change. For example, if you are working in a blue carbon project, blue carbon if you're planting mangroves, it's never just about the mangroves. It's about the fisher folks who do not have enough fish anymore. There's overfishing, but the trawlers, right? How do you get more fish into the communities or small island states? You build mangroves, you build mangrove walls. These mangrove walls get more fish, also act as a wall because they will be hit by hurricanes, typhoons, whether you like it or the more climate change increases, the more risk they have. So that means your buying carbon offsets from a mangrove program is helping livelihoods, is helping climate adaptation. Because again, climate change is not just a mitigation thing. And then you also look at different forms, any form of carbon credit project that you see within, and I specifically speak about the nature removal space. I don't have too much experience on the conservation space, which I think is super important as well. But on the removal space, we see that there you can build an ecosystem and you can take a watershed approach. And that's the biodiversity value that you bring, along with the social value that you bring, because you can't decouple the two. And that's why you should buy these offsets, because there are stories on the ground. There are people in the Pacific Islands. There are people in Africa who still don't have the access that we have in the developed world. And it is a responsibility. And I don't call it compensation. I call it responsibility. Because as a business, whether you like it or not, and if you have been in business for more than 20, 30 years, your businesses have been extractive in some way or the other. Whether you say that from now on, it's in your DNA to do climate action, but we have a responsibility towards our past. We have degraded our ecosystems, otherwise we wouldn't be here. Talking about biodiversity and restoration, what are we restoring? So how did we get to restoring? It's not just because climate change happened, the desertification happened. It's because of our actions. And I think the private sector needs to, because governments are not doing enough, and I am very vocal about it. If the governments had done enough and sorted this problem, we wouldn't be here. So as much as we keep talking about the Paris Agreement, I don't think that's the silver bullet that's going to solve everything here. So companies have to step up. And companies have to step up in a way that is more just. We keep talking about just transition, but whose transition are we talking about? We're talking about a global transition here. So with global transition, you are talking about carbon credits. You may go net zero in your own geographies. It doesn't mean a thing for global warming, does it? So it has to be a combination effort, and it has to be something that what we keep calling, decarbonize as well as take responsibility. Call you what you will. I mean, VCMI is working on the claims. Call you what you will, but carbon credits are a very important piece to this. You may claim it for offsetting, for financing climate action, financing social action. A lot of organizations, and I represent over 150 nonprofits and grassroots organizations across Asia and East Africa. We don't care what the claim is. We care about the money that is not coming to us otherwise from governments or any other institutions. We keep talking, and I've been attending COP since 2007. That's when I started this company. What has happened? We still haven't reached $100 billion a year. And 100 billion is actually a very drop in the ocean kind of money if you're talking about 180 countries. Carbon credits is a great way to funnel money into people who need it and need it now. And climate action is now. You may have targets for 2040 again. You ask a lot of the people that we work with, they don't care. You need it now and you need it now. And that's what climate action should be. And that's what carbon credits does for you. And that is why you should be supporting these carbon credit projects. Not all of them will be A grade. We get that. We also get that there is a lot of things that can be improved. And yesterday we were, and I'm going to borrow a line from one of our closed door meetings. Carbon projects evolving is a feature. It's not a bug. So there will be an evolution. This market is something that I've been working in this market for 18 years now. We've seen people who strive very hard for the integrity piece that everybody keeps talking about. It's not that simple to sort it out, but everybody's trying really hard. So give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's not have perfect be the enemy of good, because this good is super, super important for a lot of people who are not in New York right now. And that's what the whole point of buying these carbon credits is. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandeep. So I think that definitely refreshing, bringing us to reality, and the fact that I think often we say it's about the and now I would say it's and now, right? Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's talk to companies that actually are doing it and share with you. I'm not going to ask how many of you are buyers or potential buyers. I hope many of you are getting inspired, but let's just see, what Adele from GSK and Chris, yeah, you can sit over there. It's the first time I'm using the big room. So Chris from Standard Chartered, and then Viviani, thank you, from Cebedes, and Thomas from Bayer. So I have asked this for organizations, and they're all very much associated to the NCS Alliance. So to share their stories. So this is really a moment of, a testimonial. So there are no slides. It's really their views of as practitioners, as companies, how they're using credits and why they're using credits. We're not, that's just one question. So we are not going to go back and forth with so many questions. So I'm giving each of them a bit of time to elaborate and share also the challenges they had, right? About trying to explain to their CFO and decision makers and why the company is using them and how. So I'll start with Adele from GSK, and then we're
working. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Adele from GSK. I head up global strategy and partnerships. And GSK is a global biopharma company, in case you don't know. And you say 7 minutes and you ask about 5 questions. I'm not sure, but let's try. I think, first of all, I just want to underline some of the things that have been said and maybe provide them from a corporate perspective. So I think the question I would like to answer first is not why buy credits, but why protect and restore nature, because that's the imperative here. And there are 3 reasons for us to do that. The first one is, has been said way more eloquently than I'm going to say it, but it's because of climate. There is no way we're going to stay below 1.5 without nature. There is no net zero without nature. That needs to think, right? Because that's very important. Second, nature is fundamental for business resilience. We all depend on nature for manufacturing, the ingredients, the water that we use. It's fundamental. So from a business resilience perspective, we must protect and restore nature. And the third point that is very important to us and hopefully to everyone is the human element. Sandeep touched on it, but nature provides so many services to local communities, to whoever lives nearby that nature. So you can look at the livelihoods, at the health, at a just transition, at the resilience. There is just so much in there that is fundamental. So for us at GSK, protecting and restoring nature is very important and is one of actually our action pathway, as we call it, is part of our climate strategy and is part of our nature strategy. Now, if we think about then how can you protect nature, the voluntary carbon market is one way to do that, and it's an important one. So for us in specific, we have a climate target of reducing
our emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3 by 80% come 2030. So the 20% of those emissions that we will not reduce by 2030, we hope to cover through the investments in nature-based solutions. So that's, you know, why we buy it. Now, how do we do that? I also want to say, you know, we have thought really comprehensively about if and how to enter the market, because yes, I think someone mentioned it before, there are a lot of questions around the market. There is a lot of cynicism, criticism. So we really thought about that, but we still see the voluntary carbon market and investing in nature, the climate solution, a fundamental vehicle to move capital where is needed. So our approach was, yes, it's not perfect, but the solution is not to walk away. If anything, is to lean in and try collectively to make it better. So how we're trying to do that is by investing in early stage projects. So we're currently not buying from the spot market, but we're trying to help developers by investing early, partnering with them. We are not the expert here, right? So we need the technical expert, we need the local communities, we need to partner with whoever is on the ground to make this happen. And we're investing in projects now that will deliver carbon credits later on in the decade. What else? Yes, so I think the final point is, you know, because we're investing in early stage, we're really trying to improve the quality of this project. So working with technical experts, but also try to bring that health dimension that I mentioned before. So if anyone is interested in that, please reach out to me after. We have a lot to say. We've issued a toolkit together with many experts, including CSA. So if you want to come along in that journey, please let me know. Yeah, challenges many. You know, the quality is still a problem. The complexity of understanding what is really happening behind this project, getting them approved inside big corporation is not easy. But I think collectively, you know, we have an important job to do and we can do it. So thank you.
Thank you, Adele. Thank you very much. Inspiring. So let me go to Chris from Standard Chartered.
Thanks, Julia. I'm Chris Leeds. I'm the head of carbon markets development at Standard Chartered. I'm also, like Julia, on the board of the ICVCM, the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Markets, and we're trying to set those high quality thresholds that then everybody can know exactly what a high quality carbon credit is. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But as a bank, we come in as a number of different roles. We are a buyer. We are buying carbon credits and nature-based carbon credits because we think it's the right thing to do, and because, again, some of the other points that have been made around the value for money, if you like, and not just we get, but the economy and the ecospheres get, in the sense that, you know, we know that we need to invest in projects, nature-based projects across the world, and we know that the value there is extremely important to all of us. But we also act as an intermediary. So not only are we buying credits for ourselves, we're obviously buying credits for our clients and supplying them, and then we're also attempting to finance projects. And again, that's something that you need a viable market for, and a viable secondary and primary market for. So we're really keen to support and develop that. That's one of the reasons why we got heavily involved in the market in the first place. My ultimate top boss, the CEO, Bill Winters, he chaired the TSVCM, the Task Force of Scaling the Voluntary Carbon Markets. And then that led to the establishment of the ICVCM, and as I say, I'm a board member of that. And we saw how incredibly important that was. It's one of the, I mean, there are many different facets of the market that need to be streamlined and harmonized and standardized. But the supply is extremely important. People need to know and trust in the integrity of what they're buying. They need to really understand that when they put money into these projects, they are really going to do what they say they do, which is to avoid, reduce, or indeed remove carbon dioxide. And not just yesterday, but in the future, right? So we really want to see that money going in. And as Julia has said, and many people have said this afternoon, you know, this is the way that you can really get large scale revenue and funding into these projects that wouldn't get it otherwise. And the other thing to say about Standard Chartered is that we are an emerging markets bank. You know, the majority of our business is done in Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And what you'll probably notice about that is they're mainly global South economies in the global South. So for years, Standard Chartered has always talked about channeling capital from the global North to the global South and to fund businesses in that part of the world. And that was always very much, you know, important to what we do. But it's really become a key part of what we are as a bank, because there is this opportunity to take money from the global North. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have a presence in New York. It's one of the reasons I'm here, is to take that and get that funding to go into the global South. And again, we can do that at scale. And many of those projects and many of those initiatives are related to nature. You know, not only does nature support mitigation, but it also supports adaptation. That money can go into projects that will also help to help those communities adapt. So it has a double benefit. And again, as a bank, that's really the focus that we've got. We look at biodiversity, we look at blended finance. So again, this is where carbon markets come together, the carbon markets in general, and then adaptation. Those are our 4 pillars of our sustainable finance business. So yeah, we think that it's really important to invest in nature. We take a portfolio approach, but nature is incredibly important, both for avoidance, and clearly that's an area that we need to, you know, focus on to ensure that that projects really do represent a ton of CO2. But even if they don't, and you want to invest in those projects, not necessarily to make a claim, not necessarily to make some kind of net zero or carbon neutrality claim, but just to say that these projects should be invested in and that they still have value beyond the carbon. They have value around the biodiversity and the preservation that they're providing. You know, we should also think about that. But you know, and obviously the other area that we're starting to look at more closely now is the removal side. You know, the market is moving towards that. We need to work out exactly how we deal with the impermanence issues. But again, these are not insurmountable. And the work that's been done by many people, I'm sure many people in this room, you know, we really need to continue to support that, and obviously, you know, continue to buy credits and invest in carbon projects around the world.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Very interesting also points that we can elaborate later if we have time, because now I'm going to go to Viviani. Interesting, Viviani is not working for a company, but she works for an association in Brazil. So I asked her to share with us the experience of an association and how they mobilize their members and what are the drivers in their experience. So over to you.
Thank you, Julia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vivian Romero, Climate Director at the Brazilian Business Council for Sustainable Development. I'm here representing my colleague, Juliana Lopes, she's the Director of Nature and Society at the Brazilian Business. And the Council is the representative of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And we have currently more than 110 associated companies in Brazil from the different sectors and representing roughly 50% of the GDP. So we work mostly with the big companies and in an approach by promoting capacity building, advocacy, and connections and collaborations. And why Natural Climate Solutions is a strategic part of our work. Working with the business sector over the past years, we have a compelling set of reasons why we need to invest more financial flows in this agenda. So first, by recognizing that nature and society play a key role into this big challenge and for the climate outcomes. Secondly, natural climate solution, as we see as nature-based solutions for climate change and mitigation and adaptation in Brazil, especially in the Amazon biome. And finally, because we recognize the role of Brazil, first NCS representing 1/3 of the GHG emissions necessary for climate neutrality in due time, and for the potential of Brazil to deliver 15% of these outcomes. Secondly, as the Brazilian Business Council representing so many big companies, we think that it's important to have a compelling narrative representing the business sector to champion on behalf of the Amazon and to preserve and to show the decoupling of the GHG, increasing GHG, and at the same time concurrently reducing GHG emissions. So there are many scenarios in Brazil showing that, and the idea is to scale up measures and initiatives with the business sector, supporting them with the necessary knowledge, trade advocacy. And finally, because the need to internalize safeguards, social and environmental safeguards into the voluntary carbon market, strengthening integrity and also linking to the regulated market that is in place in Brazil, the big discussion. So we believe at CBEDS, the Brazilian business, that it's fundamental to implement strategies to scale up these measures by decoupling the GHG emissions, as I said, and also by leveraging and showing case the good examples of companies that are moving fast and want to pioneer on this agenda. So we've been working also on assessing challenges and opportunities for this agenda in Brazil. And one of the big concerns is about regulatory uncertainties. So how we can promote better public policies and also bring the private sector, encourage more financial investments into this agenda. And at CBEDS, at the Brazilian business, we see a very big window of opportunity now, starting with the Amazon Summit that was held a couple of weeks ago in Brazil in the Amazon region. Of course, we have in the roadmap of COP30 to be coordinated in Brazil. We have G20, Brazil presiding, hosting G20 next year. We also have COP16 on biodiversity. So we think there is this big window of opportunity to scale up investments, the investments that are necessary to bring the urgency and the measures in place. And we've been working on this approach of capacity building, advocacy, and connections and collaborations. And on capacity building, we have a study with a local institute called IDESAM, and we assessed a couple of companies on the reasons and the necessary measures to scale up NCS credits in Brazil. And it's very interesting to understand the increasing perception and the increasing involvement of this agenda as a corporate risk, but also as an opportunity to increase and to mobilize investments over the past years. So in this study, we detailed plus than 10 projects carried out by different companies involving plus than 30 partners in the legal Amazon. So it's very important for us to work with these local communities and different actors, recognizing that local institutions have an important role to bring the local community and also to scale up this traditional knowledge. And these projects benefit plus than 50,000 people in the Amazon region. So in the advocacy component, we really engage with decision makers in the federal government. This year, we have the government, the Minister of Finance, for example, launched a Green Deal in Brazil, which is the ecological transformation plan. And the Brazilian Business Council is playing a role of bringing the private sector into the discussion and the consultation process with key contributions, assessing challenges and opportunities to strengthen this plan, this Green Deal plan. And it's based on 6 elements, and one of them is bioeconomy. Besides that, we are in a very important momentum in Brazil with the regulation process of the market, the carbon market. There is one bill that is about to be approved probably by next week in the Senate. And the Brazilian business is working with the federal government and also with the Congress to strengthen the bill and also to bring the key challenges that need to be overcome and need to be strengthened for the next phase, for the implementation phase. So we are in this agenda for many years. We have been in this agenda, and a regulated market is fundamental to bring more visibility to the voluntary market. And just to let you know, the initial bill didn't mention a link with the voluntary market, but we supported this movement of bringing the intersection of the voluntary offer of carbon credits with integrity and so on into this big bill. So now we have this intersection very explicit, especially bringing also the traditional communities, the importance of integrity and safeguards. So this topic is of key relevance for the business sector in Brazil, and it's the way that we are seeing a next step for the regulated carbon market, bringing these different sectors. So just to finalize, the third point of our approach is on connection and collaborations. And on that, we are sharing compelling reasons for why the business needs to be more involved into this agenda and bringing through platforms and tools such as the Net Zero platform and the Action for Nature platform that we are coordinating. And we want to engage more and more with different local companies, but also globally. And we are about to have this roadmap in COP28 until from Dubai to Berlin narrative and beyond.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Viviane. This is really refreshing to also see how, a business association actually tries to influence positively policy, understanding the critical role that good policy can play in creating the level playing field and enabling more action. So really great. It will be, we need to talk about that, maybe use it really as an example, and so to share more, in other context. So Thomas, over to you. What about Bayer's experience?
Does it work? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know. After I'm the last one, so I don't know what I will add that it will be new. But I will at least give a little bit of the perspective of Bayer in terms of why buying nature-based solutions. Basically, I think that we have, as we mentioned, a role to play if we want this market to be developed, and we're seeing that that's the trajectory. We have to have a shared participation on this end. So Bayer has incorporating in the strategy very critical how we incorporate assets, mainly on agroforestry and also into agriculture. And the one thing, as you mentioned, Adele, it's very difficult to explain these kind of things inside the companies, no? Especially when there is a lot of skepticism, because everybody understands the limitations of these offsets. So, and nobody wants to buy something that actually comes with a risk. But what we need to explain that is there is no risk-free in this type of projects. So I think that that's basically what I will center my main learnings on this. And I like to see, even with our strategy on offsets, an opportunity as an open dialogue, an opportunity to further collaboration, as you mentioned as well. How do we integrate into the new standards that are going to appear to formalize that as a part of the strategy? So going into forward, I think that it's important to have a very interesting climate hierarchy on how you're going to incorporate your carbon offsets together with a very clear due diligence on what to do that, but that will not put you out of risk. So I think that we need to keep on developing, because if we do not support this type of market, even if we are in an initial phase, even if we're talking about 10 years, or more working on this type of things, I think that we need to keep on developing and supporting this type of market, that we go into the right direction. If not, we will not be able to achieve the goals and targets that we need to aim. So looking forward, I think that also the projects that we embark on have to be very aligned to our strategy and as a business. And also we, as a agricultural company, so I'm from Bayer, I work in sustainability, sorry, I should have said that at the beginning, but we also have a great stake on the co-benefits that this type of project comes. And that's where we have already learned from our work with working with farmers, as Sandeep mentioned, these projects sometimes are life-changing. I had the opportunity to be in Vietnam last week, and you see how not only governments are trying to push farmers to work into different ways of making agriculture more sustainable, and this will be a part of. So agriculture will have to have a very strong stand in terms of nature-based solutions. And that's where we will have a stronger say. And that's where we need all the different markets and offsets and standards to keep on evolving to make this a reality. In our strategy also, we're moving more into agricultural type of offsets, and that's where we think that we need to develop.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Yeah, it's good that you mentioned there is no risk solution. So, and I think, you know, the key of good management is to manage the risk, but no risk. I have never really heard anything that has no risk. So it's good to know that there are tools and there are standards and tools and processes. And, you know, there are a number of companies that are already testing these. So there is a lot to share. And this is one of the commitments that in the NCS Alliance is actually making, is to help other companies come on board and learn from those who are already doing it, how to actually walk this, you know, journey. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A. So yeah, great. Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ricardo Blendi. I'm the commercial director of Regreen. We are the leading ecological restoration company in Brazil. So we try to provide premium removal carbon credits to the market. First of all, let me say thank you for the panel. Thank you for the organization. And I'd like to say to you buyers, be resilient, because I put myself into your shoes and I see Bloomberg, I see The Guardian and all that, and I imagine how scared you are. Scared of being there in that news the following day or next week or next month, and in a moment that the market is still maturing. So my question is exactly on that front. You have the internal convincing, you have the risk on the market's maturing. I would like to understand a little bit more when you are sitting in your chair with all these internal and external challenges, what's the most pressing challenge, and how project developers like ourselves that try to do as best we can to provide quality and differentiate ourselves from the poor projects that all markets and maturing markets have. What can we do to help you differentiate us out of that confusion of that moment of the market? Thank you.
It's a question that is valid for all of you. So if, you know, maybe we start with
Yeah, I
Adele
can
and
start.
then if
Thank you.
yeah.
That's a fantastic question, and I take your be resilient. So I will continue. So I think there are a few points in there. How you can help us, I think, is by being very open with us in exchanging information. And I think it's a journey, right? And we are learning. You know, you might have been doing this for years, but in the corporate setting, we are really learning about the complexity. So sometimes you need to tell us 10 times why something it's in a way or not another, or why you've done it in a way because you think it's best, because there is no best way. You know, these are all emerging practice. So I think my ask is always, you know, I will never pretend to be the expert here. I am not. But I want to open doors for the project developers and to provide that finance. But in order to do that, you need to give me the information, because my best way to answer criticism internally and externally is never to be caught off guard. So if someone at any point asks, oh, what about that project? If I know, and if I have a way to explain, then half of the issues are solved there, right? No surprises, a lot of information, especially at the beginning. I don't think this is, you know, if I think about what we were saying, we need to scale, we need to move forward. I don't think this is ideal forever, right? I really hope that in a few years, we will be in a place where we buy from the spot market. We don't need to stay so close because there is no trust. I hope the trust will be built, but it's a journey. And unfortunately, trust has been broken many times for many reasons. So in this journey, we all need to learn and we need to rebuild that trust. And then hopefully, it will become a bit easier to transact without necessarily being so close and wanting to know everything. So I think, yeah.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say, slightly different point. What a great marketing ploy by The Guardian to go down this route. Because I tell you what, we're sitting in here in New York, and people talk about The Guardian, and it's a Brazilian project developer. I mean, they've got fantastic, coverage worldwide on the back of this. So well done, Guardian. But I think, going back to your point, the transparency is incredibly important, and that quality. That's why I think that the work that the ICVCM is doing is so important. It's not trying to replace the standards; it's just trying to create that consistency and that harmonization between them, so that everybody can understand what is a high quality carbon credit. So you as a developer know what the standard is that you've got to be building to. And as a buyer, you know that when you buy those credits, they have that high integrity. So actually, so that you won't have to go all the way upstream all the time, you can buy from the spot market because you know you're going to be buying a high quality product. I mean, I think of the companies going upstream is, Volkswagen is actually quite a good example here, where they've gone upstream. It would be like them having to build their own steel, right? Why would they make their own steel? Right? They would do it because they weren't confident in the quality of that product. But they don't. They let somebody else buy it because there are standards. There are, there's a harmonization that goes on, and I think that's what's really important in this market. So that the quality side is the thing I think that's the most important. After that, what people do with those credits, in a way, is up to them. But obviously that's where VCMI comes in, and the claims that people are making. We want to ensure that they're making the right claims and they're doing the right thing around carbon credits, and they're using them for the right reasons. But ultimately, I see, the carbon credit is just a way of getting finance into projects that just wouldn't get it otherwise. And but you've got to make sure that the quality is there in the first place.
Thank you for your comment and question. Actually, He Green is a key partner of the Brazilian business company. We hosted a joint event yesterday, and one of the key discussion was exactly about the integrity and how we can strengthen this way of seeing and perceiving integrity. I think we are in a learning curve where social and other key elements that are now in place need to be scaled up. And by the time that the market is regulated, as I mentioned, as the case of Brazil, and also under Article 6, under the Paris Agreement, I think we will have a more robust framework, bringing more visibility and also legitimacy to this whole carbon market. And when we talk about carbon pricing, seeing the place and the countries where the voluntary has a bigger role, as the case of Brazil, as we have the condition to offer NCS credits that are linked to local communities, bringing these social safeguards. I think we will be able to showcase and to scale up. So I understand the feeling and the concerns as companies are including as corporate risks, as I mentioned. But by the time public perception on climate change, not only on mitigation, but also on adaptation, companies are starting to internalize more and more on integrity and other elements that can bring to more capacity. So that's why the Brazilian business is really focusing on bringing more workshops, capacity building, and these connections to bring to connect the dots, and also to see the whole the economy-wide target as we have now. It's not only about tackling deforestation with command and control policies, but also by bringing a regulated market with a very robust voluntary offer that is linked as a transitional mechanism, as we see. So it's a full package of measures that by combining them in a very integrated perspective, we can have a more robust governance into this climate agenda.
Thank you. That leaves you at the end.
I will do it short. I think that I will give another perspective. No, so usually the surprises doesn't only have to come from the projects. Usually the surprises can come also from the market. So what I would like to say is that internally, we have to be very conscious that we need to start. And even we start small or we start with few projects, but we need to act because the surprises could come when a regulation could appear, or now that we are trying to solve the climate, now we're moving into nature. And everything will be intertwined. So I think that we need to keep it going. And even if we want to go big, my recommendation usually internally is start slow, but act.
Thank you. So resilience and action. Excellent.
An Argentinian, sorry. I'm from Argentina.
One more question. Yeah,